And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and next to me, as always, is my beautiful co-host, Laraib. And we are super excited to go into the divisional round playoff games for the NFL. We are down to the final 8 teams, the Elite 8, as we pick and decide who moves on to the conference championship round, Laraib. This is super exciting. But the biggest thing that we have to point out is from last week's picks. We really didn't talk about it in our last episode. We had the instant reaction. Plus, we didn't know what the outcome of the Cowboys-Bucks game was in our real reaction episode. So, but now it's finalized. I have a 1 lead on you in the picks, and there's not that many games in the playoffs. All these games matter. So you're going to have to get some making up to do, Rob.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I got some nasty pieces lined up for you for these 4 games that we coming up, Lewis. But why don't we go ahead and start with the Jacksonville Jaguars who had an upset last week, that amazing 27-point comeback going into Kansas City to play the Chiefs. Chiefs minus 8.5, Lewis. And the big thing in this game really is Patrick Mahomes 9-1 in his career after a bye week. He's been to the AFC Championship every single year. He's been a starter. And I don't think it's going to be any different this year when you're facing a Jacksonville Jaguars team who can be exploited on defense. And Trevor Lawrence, he had an amazing comeback in that one, but he looked really, really shaky. And I know it's one thing giving up turnovers to the Chargers. And I know Justin Herbert is one of my favorite quarterbacks in the league. And he put up, great performance in this one, but giving up 4 turnovers to Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City is a death wish, Lewis.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it. This is the slaughterhouse for teams with their cute little wild card win. Then they go into the Lions Den, aka Kansas City, and get their butt whooping every single year. It's the same song and dance. We saw this with the Texans, we saw this with the Titans, we've seen this with other teams. The Bengals broke the curse last year. So, but let's talk about this particular matchup, Rob. You can look at all the historical things. Andy Reid off a bye, Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, Patrick Mahomes versus rookie quarterbacks, all these things, they really heavily favor the Chiefs. But what are the big X's and O things that I'm looking at in this game? Well, we were talking about it in the Chargers game, is this Jaguars pass defense is not really that good. It's been improved, but still, in the regular season, 27th against the pass. And you saw in the Chargers game, the Chargers early in that game, they were in the red zone a lot, but Justin Herbert, he was able to move the ball. They just had big red zone problems, and the Jaguars did a really good job in the red zone, limiting the Chargers to 3 and allowing, not the wound to get so big that the Jaguars were able to come back and fix it before it got worse. But in this game, you cannot do that against Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs have the second best red zone offense in the entire NFL. So they will capitalize on any and every mistake you make. And we saw this matchup in, earlier in the season. A lot of people forgot about the game because that was when the Jaguars were teetering. We just was like, oh, yeah, chalk it up. It's a Chiefs game. It was a surprisingly close game. But the big thing in that game was how effective the Jaguars were at running the ball. And that was one of the games where the Chiefs got out super early. We thought it was just going to be over by then. But then, they started figuring things out. And the thing that I admire about Doug Peterson is he sticks to his game script. He knows what's going to work, and he keeps going through it. And in that game, they kept running the ball. Now, in that game, James Robinson was a big factor, but he is no longer on the team, obviously. So we'll see what Travis Etienne and JaMychal Hasty are able to do in this matchup. But overall, I'm very excited to see. I think this is going to be an entertaining game, Laraib. But ultimately, it's Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. It's hard to pick against that duo.
Yeah, Lewis, and getting back to some of those X's and O's that you were talking about, the Jacksonville Jaguars defense has been 3rd worst this year against tight ends. And who's the best tight end in the NFL is Travis Kelce going up against this Jaguars defense. I think they're going to be exploited up and down the field all game long. And, I will give credit to this Jaguars team, Lewis. Like you said, Doug Peterson, he is not somebody who's going to back down in this game at all. Him and Andy Reid have a little bit of history. They've been on the same coaching staff here and there in different teams for 10 years. They've shared a team, Lewis. And so, if it's going to be somebody who's going to beat the Chiefs in Kansas City, I think Doug Peterson could be that guy. But I don't think it's going to be in this one, especially with Trevor Lawrence in his second playoff start. I think he's going to be a little bit more nervous in this one, and it's going to come all collapsing down for the Jaguars team. It will be a little enjoyable, like you said, but I think the Chiefs win 31-21.
The biggest thing that the Chiefs need to focus on in this game is not allowing Christian Kirk and Zay Jones to beat you, because we saw the Chargers late in that game. They started giving up big plays down the field to Christian Kirk, and he abused him in their last game too, when Christian Kirk went off for 106 and 2 touchdowns. But in this matchup, the Chiefs are a bottom 5 team in defending the number 1 receivers in the NFL. So the number 1 guy, he will eat. But I just don't think Christian Kirk is that type of receiver to really make you pay to be a difference in this game. And like you mentioned, Travis Kelce should have a field day. And given all the preparation, everything, they've already played this Jags team. Andy Reid's going to have so much to work with. Kadarius Toney is going to be a big factor in this game as well. So I think, that was the first game, if I'm not mistaken, that he played with the Chiefs when he was traded from the Giants. So I think he also plays a big factor in this game. And the Chiefs are going to be looking very dangerous after. I agree with you. Chiefs win this game. I'm going to go 31-17, cover the spread pretty easily. And they move on to the conference championship, maybe in their stadium, maybe in Atlanta. But, Laraib, let's go ahead and move on to the next Saturday game, where we have the New York Football Giants coming off a huge road upset, but some people, not us, thought it would be that would be the case. Going into Philadelphia to face the Eagles. The Eagles are 7.5-point favorites, Laraib. So we've seen this game twice, obviously a divisional game. The last matchup, week 18, it was kind of a, the Eagles needed that game. It came down to the last second, but who was really carrying? I feel like the coaches really held their cards to their chest because they didn't want to put too much out. But what do you think changes in this third matchup, Laraib? Because it's super hard to beat a team 3 times in a season. And we've seen in history that the team that wins both tends to, like, half the time lose the third matchup as well. So this is a tough matchup, Laraib.
Well, Lewis, I'm going to have to disagree with you on your statistics there. Actually, it's about a 33 to 36% chance that the team who lost twice in a row will win the third one. It's a little bit less than what you would expect, Lewis, but the big thing for me is going to be Jalen Hurts in this game. In the past month, he's only played one game. He wasn't in those last, week 16, week 17. Of course, he comes back in a crucial week 18, and they have the bye. So we'll see if he has to knock off some of the rust in this game, especially against the Giants defense, Lewis, who we talked about on our Tuesday pod, or excuse me, on our Monday pod. They were the underrated part of that win over Minnesota. And, they were able to shut down Justin Jefferson. So we'll see if they will have the same type of performance against AJ Brown. And of course, it'll be up to Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert to pick up some of that slack. But I like Philadelphia in this one, Lewis. I know the coaching, I'm going to say the coaching goes towards the Giants team, but this Eagles team, I don't think Nick Sirianni is too far behind coaching in Brian Daboll. I think Jalen Hurts with a little bit of extra rest and just how that team has played all season long. I like the Eagles in this one.
Yeah, I agree with you, Laraib. I think the biggest matchup for me is what we've seen from Daniel Jones all season. I alluded to this in our, post-game breakdown of, we were really talking about, like, is Daniel Jones really that guy, franchise guy? And then I pointed out that this Vikings defense was historically bad, and they were wide open all across the field. They will not be able to do that in Philadelphia, a rested Philadelphia team. I think this is going to be a low-scoring game, Laraib, because I think Jalen Hurts, I'm a big believer in how you finish the season really reflects in how you go into the postseason. The only team I can think about, my New Orleans Saints 2009, we were 13-0, finished 0-3, but then, won the Super Bowl. So that was pretty unprecedented. But most teams, you want to start getting hot early. And for this inexperienced Eagles team, a lot of this is, you really need to take care of business here. So I'm worried about their offense in this matchup. I think they have a similar offense to the Vikings, and that Vikings offense was working really well. A good running game, big threats on the outside, and a good tight end across the middle, and that caused the Giants some problems, but not enough to beat them. I think the biggest X factor in this game is Jalen Hurts' legs. That is what can really hurt this Giants team. But if he's not 100%, or if he's trying to favor the shoulder to try to, maybe take a few plays off here and there, that's not going to work. Now, I still think, even if he's 85%, they can win this game. I definitely am not calling for Minshew. No doubt about that. But I think that, Jalen Hurts really has to put it all on the line. You realize, hey, 3 wins and you won the Super Bowl. You can see it. It's right in front of you. You need to put it all out there. And I think if he is 100% and he's playing to his full capacity, like we've seen this season, they win this game, like, no doubt in my mind. They get out to a huge lead, and the Giants are just incapable of coming back. But I think he plays around 90% in this game, Laraib. I do have the Eagles winning, but I don't know if they cover. I'm going to go Eagles 23 to Giants 17. It's going to be a very close game, but the Eagles do get out, and they're able to just ice the game, run out the clock in the end.
Yeah, these two teams matched up this twice this regular season, of course, as divisional opponents, and the final score for those games combined was 70-38, right? The first time that these two teams matched up, that everybody was going, both sides are pretty healthy. Of course, they match up in week 18. The Giants had their backups in. Even that game, was close. But in that first meeting, the Eagles just ran this team off the field, especially coming off that first loss of the season against the Commanders. They just went to town on this Giants team on the road. And I think they can do it once again, Lewis. I think the Giants have a good opportunity to cover in this one. And I like the game to be close. Of course, it's a divisional game. So I'm going to pick the Eagles just like you. Jalen Hurts, like you said, his rushing ability is going to be the X factor. And this Giants defense, they have their own rushing quarterback at quarterback. So maybe they can, learn a little bit from Daniel Jones's habit and try to, replicate some of that against Jalen Hurts. But I like the Eagles, Lewis, 27-21.
All right. Well, I agree with you, but let's move on to our third game, Laraib. Probably the best game of the weekend. We had a tease of this game, but obviously the tragic situation with Damar Hamlin had to cancel the game. But we're thankful enough to get this rematch. But this time it's in Buffalo. Bills are favored by 5.5. Laraib, let me ask you, these teams, in my opinion, are playing not that great of football as of late. Injuries on the Bengals side, turnovers on the Bills side. They don't look like the dominant teams that we've seen from parts of this season. So going into this game, which team has the biggest flaw to exploit, I guess I could say?
The biggest flaw in this game, or the biggest thing that's just glaring at me off the page, Lewis, is Josh Allen's turnovers. He leads the league with 22 turnovers and interceptions and fumbles combined. And he was the reason that game was so close against the Dolphins on Sunday. And I think he's also going to be the reason why they lose in this one. He's always trying to force the ball somewhere where it shouldn't be. He's holding on to it a little bit too long. And we've been saying about this team throughout the season, Lewis. Stephon Diggs, of course, is an awesome number one receiver. But besides that, they kind of lack that second guy who's always been consistent. Dawson Knox is good, but he's up and down. Gabe Davis, of course, he has 4 touchdowns in a playoff game, but he's up and down all season long. So it really comes down to Stephon Diggs and his connection with Josh Allen. And I think the Bengals are going to be able to exploit that and make Josh Allen, have some untimely turnovers in this one and cost them the game.
Well, I actually disagree with you, Laraib. I think the biggest thing and the biggest problem between both these teams is the Bengals offensive line. Yes. And it's hard not to say. Alex Kappa did not practice today. He's questionable, but it's really looking like he's not going to play. I highly doubt that Jonah Williams is able to play in this game. He was considered week to week. I've never heard of that in the NFL. You usually hear day to day. Week to week, what does that mean? Just give us a week. It seems like, hey, if you're 60%, we're going to throw you on the field because that's better than what we have, which sounds awful, but it looks awful too when you're watching the game. Now, I will say the Ravens defense was the best defense in the NFL, in my opinion, and that is now gone. You face them, you survived, but now going into Buffalo, and yeah, as a Bengals fan, you could say maybe it was a screwy thing. The game wasn't played. This game could be in Cincinnati. You had the lead, but obviously, things aren't perfect in life, and this is what the situation is. You can get your revenge the good old-fashioned way by beating the odds and beating the Bills, but I don't think that's going to happen because there's two things about this offensive line. It seems obvious saying this, but it really affects how this Bengals team plays on offense. They are the best when they're able to run the ball. And we've seen this season when they put up their best performances, it's been on the backs of Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine. But in the last 4 weeks, they've averaged less than 50 yards per game, which is the worst in the NFL out of all the remaining playoff teams. So their lack to run the ball really hurts them in Buffalo. Snowy environment. You need to set the tempo, against this Bills pass rush, which is it's formidable. And if you're dropping back every single play and these Bills pass rushers can pin their ears down and just run right at Joe Burrow, he's good in pressure, but he's not great in pressure. I love Joe Burrow, but in some of these moments where it just gets to him, it's impossible to get out of a lot of these situations. Their offensive line is that bad. And I think the Bills at home, that crowd's going to be jumping. Their potential last, home playoff game this season, they're going to be going crazy. Bills Mafia, all the emotion. DeMar Hamlin's going to be at the game. They're going to be up for this one. And I think this is just a really, really bad matchup for this Bengals team. And that's why I give the distinctive edge to the Bills. But before I hand this back to you, I want to mention you were talking about some of the playmakers on the Bills that you really don't trust. Well, honestly, this might sound crazy, but Cole Beasley, he showed me something in that game against the Dolphins. He still has some zip. He scored a touchdown. He looked pretty impressive for them in the middle of the field, just didn't care to get hit. And Gabe Davis, believe it or not, he's just a playoff guy. He had a very impressive long touchdown against the Dolphins, and I think he's going to show up. Now, yes, turnovers are the biggest thing in football that can ruin a game. But we saw Trevor Lawrence and the Jags have 5 turnovers and still get out of there. I think the home field advantage and just the domination in the trenches. And I think the Bills have kind of developed a little bit of a run game. But in these big playoff games, it's Josh Allen and his legs. And there's no stopping that. So I think those are the biggest advantages in my eyes and why I like the Bills in this matchup, Laraib.
Well, Lewis, the key word that you mentioned there was emotion, right? About, DeMar Hamlin and the situation going along with him. But we've seen this emotion-filled Bills team, just be crazy. They've been acting strange, first half against the Patriots in week 18, that was a tight game. And of course, this one, you talk about all the emotion of DeMar Hamlin getting out of the hospital and this Bills team just, playing crazy out there, of course. And so I think Josh Allen turnovers in this one is the reason they lose. And Joe Burrow, who's been undefeated in his career in January, makes himself 7-0 as they move on to match up once again against the Kansas City Chiefs. I like the Bengals 27-24. The playmakers across the board for them get it done in this one, even with that banged up O-line.
I will say the spread in this game is too high. In my opinion, I think this should be a 3-point spread. But I do like the Bills in this matchup. I just think there's too many things that favor them. And you say emotion's a bad thing, but they haven't lost. I mean, they still find ways to rally. They've been the cardiac kids. And yeah, Joe Burrow, he's the ultimate warrior. He's going to keep this game close. Don't get it twisted about that. But I just think this Bills team has more experience. They have, this is their year. They have more
experience than the Bengals team who was in the Super Bowl last year.
Yes, they do, because they've been in the playoffs for the last 4 years, and the Bengals have won 4 playoff games. So yeah, they do. So they've been in these moments. I mean, yeah,
no pressure. High pressure moment can get bigger than the Super Bowl. So I mean,
and they lost, so it got to them. I mean, it is what it is.
They're right back here, and they're gonna beat this team on the road, Lewis. Josh Allen. You said this all year long. His inability to win 1-score games. Of course, they did it past week against Skylar Thompson, but this is not Skylar Thompson. This is Joe Shiesty, Joe Cool, Joe Burrow, Joe Burr. So he's going to be going crazy. He's going to be undefeated in January.
Never do that again.
We'll be talking about something else.
I am picking the Bills in this game, 34-30. I think it's going to be a great game. Regardless of who wins, I'm personally a Bengals fan, Laraib. I would love for them to win, but for the sake of the picks, I'm brain. It's all about the brain. It's not the numbers. I'm a big numbers guy. Going with the Bills in this matchup.
Well, and the number is Joe Burrow's undefeated in January.
Yeah. Yeah, so Tom Brady was undefeated against the Cowboys in his career. Saw it happen. Anyway, let's move on now to our final matchup of the weekend. We have the Dallas Cowboys traveling to San Francisco to face the 49ers. This line's been kind of fluctuating all throughout the week, but now it is settled at a solid 4 points for the 49ers at home. Laura, this game, going into the Monday night game, everyone was saying, the winner of that game's just going to get steamrolled by the 49ers. Who cares what happens? This is just a Santa Clara Invitational to get rocked. But after the Cowboys put on a pretty dominating performance, did that change your mind about this upcoming matchup?
How about them Cowboys, Lewis? They put on a dominating performance. Dak Prescott looked like the best he's played all season long. And even off a short week of 5 days rest, Lewis, I love this Cowboys team in Santa Clara. This is going to be Brock Purdy's biggest challenge all season long. The 49ers, since Brock Purdy came in, really haven't had to play a tough defense, Lewis. Let me tell you, Seahawks twice, Commanders without Chase Young, the Raiders, the Cardinals, and we could say the Bucks have been, all right on defense. But now you're facing Micah Parsons and that Cowboys pass rush, Lewis. I think it's going to be a really, really rough game for him. We saw him in the first half with the Seahawks game. He looked a little nervous, Lewis. Of course, with the Seahawks pressure, which is absolutely nothing, he's going to be getting rocked all Sunday long by your boy Micah Parsons. The big thing in this, Lewis, is Kyle Shanahan against Dan Quinn. We know these two coaches go way back in Atlanta when they blew that big lead, and Dan Quinn is going to be looking for some revenge in this one since Kyle Shanahan was not able to run out the clock in that Super Bowl. So I like the Cowboys on the road, Lewis. And the big thing for me in that Cowboys game was Tony Pollard had 15 carries and Ezekiel Elliott had 13. So in 2 more carries, how many more yards do you think Tony Pollard got than Ezekiel Elliott?
Like 70?
Yeah,
I'm pretty
50.
sure.
In 2 more carries, he got 50 more rush yards. That was the difference in that game. Zeke starting off his career was a great receiving running back, but Tony Pollard is electric with the football in his hands. And if they continue to feed him in this one, I really like the Cowboys, Lewis.
Yeah, well, on that note, I just think Pollard at this point of his career is a much more electric athlete, just a better dynamic playmaker. Ezekiel honestly looks like a fullback to me at this point in his career. But let's talk about this game. Before, the postseason started, my opinion on this Cowboys team, I went back and researched when you beat me in the playoffs. And I was thinking, well, what did he do? What did he do that beat me? He hitched his wagon to a certain team and it led him all the way to the championship. And I bet against, it was the Bucks, right? I bet against them in the wild card, in the divisional, in the conference, and in the Super Bowl. And every single time, you got me. And this year, you're starting to make the mistake. But no, you're not. How about them Cowboys? This was going to be my crazy pick of the week, Laraib. I'm shocked you're going with the Cowboys too. But I agree with what you were saying. This is a huge spot for Brock Purdy. Now, yes, the biggest matchup for me in this game is this Cowboys run defense against this run offense of the 49ers, because we've seen this Cowboys team get ran on, all throughout the season. The Jaguars ran on them. We saw the Eagles run on them in the first matchup. This team can get exposed on the ground. The Packers ran the ball very well on them as well. So what can they do to stop this game? And like you said, the Dan Quinn, Kyle Shanahan familiarity, there's a lot of weapons on this 49ers team. But if they need to get that start. If they can get out to like a 10, 14-point lead, that is going to be the nail in the coffin, because then you can get these pass rushers, DeMarcus Lawrence, Micah Parsons, Odigizua, Torrance Armstrong. You got a bunch of beasts on this defensive line who are going to be screaming at Brock Purdy. And we saw the game. Yeah, the numbers look amazing. 300 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. But, Laraib, let's be honest. He did not look that good. Eye test wise, he was just throwing it to Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, and George Kittle. Like, it's not that hard to look like a good quarterback when you have those guys on your team.
It's not that hard to look against a good quarterback against the Seattle Seahawks defense.
Right, and that was my next point, is the Seahawks defense is atrocious, as we both know, painfully. But, going into this matchup, you're not going to get the same Dallas defense. And I think the Cowboys on offense figured something out. And what I saw from what the Seahawks did last week is you can expose the back line of this 49ers defense. We saw DK Metcalf put up 160 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he was torching Javarius Ward on the outside. The Cowboys have great weapons of their own. They just need to be able to use them, and Dak cannot turn the ball over in this game, because that will be the end of this team. I think this game is going to be close, but I just think that in this spot, you need a quarterback. You need your leader to be the guy with experience. Purdy's been a great story, undefeated as a starter. It's hard to pick against him, honestly. But in this spot, I'm going with Dak. And honestly, shout out to Mike McCarthy, because I think he's done a pretty good job this season, given the circumstance, given the optics going into the season. Now, could he be exposed in this game? Absolutely. But I do like the matchup for the Cowboys, and I am picking the Cowboys in this ball game, Laraib.
Yeah, before we started the playoffs, Lewis, the 49ers was going to be that team that I hitched my wagon onto. They remind me so much of that Buccaneers team when I beat you in those picks in 2020, Lewis. And it all really came down to that front seven. But the big difference between this team and that team, Lewis, is the quarterback. Like you mentioned, Brock Purdy is just not Tom Brady. So, I mean, I got to ride with the Cowboys in this one. I like what the 49ers have done, but like you mentioned, they got exposed in the secondary. For the Bucs team, back when they won, they had guys like Richard Sherman, they had Jamel Dean, they had Sean Murphy Bunting, they had Antoine Winfield Jr. But you look at this 49ers team, they got Hufanga. Of course, he's a great, he's a great guy in the box, Lewis. I really like him as one of those guys on the front seven, but in secondary, I think he can be exposed. And we saw Travarius Ward this week just get dominated by DK. He just big manned him. And I think, CeeDee Lamb, of course, he's, a little bit more athletic, not as big. He's a little bit more guy who likes to work.
DK's a better receiver than CD.
Right. But I still think, in space,
much better.
I like CeeDee Lamb in space, and of course,
I disagree.
Dalton Schultz. I think he's been the X factor for this team, Lewis. And now that he's been back from injury, I think the Cowboys get it done in this one. I like the Cowboys 27-24.
And I am going Cowboys 23-18. Lower scoring game, but it's going to be a crazy game. And I'm very surprised that you're also going with this. I thought this would be the wild card that would lose me all the playoffs, but we seem to be on the same side. But before we head out, Laraib, this is obviously a short episode. There's less games to cover. Let's go through our best bets of the weekend. Started off, my best bet of the weekend. It seems like the obvious pick, but it is the Chiefs covering the 8.5-point spread. There's just too many things that favor the Chiefs in this game. You can believe in the magic of this Jaguars team, but I just think they're a year too early. They're a few players short. I think they're going to get there. I think this is a huge offseason for the Jags, and they should be super proud of how far they've made it this season, coming from a 4-8 team all the way to winning, 7 games in a row to be in this position. So they deserve all the credit in the world. But at the end of the day, this is a skill issue, and I like the Chiefs.
And for my best bet, I'm going to pick the Bengals plus 5.5. I know you and I disagree on who's going to win this game, but we can both agree I think is going to come down to a Tyler Bass or Evan McPherson field goal. So plus 5.5, in my opinion, is a steal for that line, Lewis. But I think that will wrap up the First and Goal podcast divisional round for 2022-2023 NFL season. We had a guest come on for instant reactions after that game. So if you watching this want to be on instant reactions for Cowboys 49ers after that game on Sunday, go ahead and try to hit us up on social media. Leave a comment down below. But with that being said, Lewis, I think this is the First and Goal pod signing off.
Peace.